Hey friends, thanks for following along in my journey through my weekly writing journal. I thought I'd give you a little update on where I'm at following my last writing sprint. It was actually, believe it or not, the first time that I started to write the prose for my book. And it was really fun to get into the scene and really start thinking about writing the words, the descriptions, creating the action, and that sort of thing. So it was really enjoyable to finally get into that space. I did figure out that there are some things that I need to think about a little deeper as I get into this process. I struggled with the point of view that I was writing with. I wasn't sure I was following all the rules in the way that I was writing it. And I think what I need to do is I need to do a little bit of a side journey on the proper way to write a point of view. What I'm picturing is that sometimes the story is seen through this character's eyes, and sometimes the story is seen through this other character's eyes, even though there is a main protagonist. I think that I want to see multiple perspectives. And even though I know that, I think I need to know a little bit more about how to write that way. Again, I've usually only written shorter stories, and it hasn't been so character driven. And so I think this is just something I need to learn a little bit more about. That being said, I did get some of the scene written. I do have some TBDs in there because another thing that I realized is that I have a few holes in the scene because the scene I chose to write first is the main one that I know about and I know the most about. So that's why I chose this scene. But because it's not the start of the book, I don't necessarily know everything that the reader has been told so far in the story. So it was hard to know what I should be explaining in the scene as far as things about the magic and things like that. Or have I already explained that to the reader previously in the story? And so it was a little bit difficult to write the scene because I didn't know yet what the reader already knows at this point. So I have some placeholders sitting there so that at some point I can go back and fill in the blanks if this is the time that I'm going to reveal something, or get rid of that placeholder because it's not something I need to re-explain at this point in the story. So that is something that was an interesting experience and thing to realize while I was writing. And so I think these are the two biggest things that I learned from the writing experience in this sprint. And I think my takeaway, other than learning more about the POV to how to do it effectively, is that I think I need to have some sort of documentation. And I don't know if there does anybody think this way, the way that I'm thinking. I think I need to document the various things about the world and about the magic and have some sort of checklist or documentation to say, I explained this in chapter 1, or I explained this in chapter 4, or I explained this in this book versus that book, that kind of thing, to know that if I explained it already in chapter 4, I'm okay to talk about it in chapter 5. But if I'm talking about it in chapter 3 and I haven't explained it yet, either I have to not refer to it or I need to change where the description shows up in the story. Like I said, I don't know if anybody else thinks like this, but I feel like in this world building concept, there is so much, it's a world that doesn't exist. And so I have to tell you about it as the reader. And I want to make sure that I give you the details before you need them to understand the story. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Really, I'm figuring so much of this out on my own. And the deeper I get into it, I know I'm going to have to dive into more resources to learn a little bit more. And I'm going to enjoy that process. I'm going to enjoy that part of the journey. I think because this is my first big project, it can't just be about the writing. It has to be learning about everything. that goes into the writing process so I can be effective. The goal is not just to get this book and this series out into the world. The point is for me to learn more about how to write and write well and create stories that can be enjoyable for an audience and gets people excited to follow along in whatever journey I'm putting my characters through in my stories. Okay, I will leave with that, and thank you as always for following along, and we'll see you next time. Bye.